Excellent. Thank you so much. So, hey, everyone, and welcome to Taking a Coffee Break with JFrog. We're going to be talking today about multi-site replication. To introduce you to our guest for today, I wanted to cover what is the topic and the theme that I want you to keep in mind as we go throughout this presentation. Right. So the topic, like I said, is multi-site replication. And the theme that I want you to keep in mind is how we can improve data consistency and quality across multiple data centers or sites using multi-site replication with JFrog. All right. So with that, let me introduce our guest speaker today, who is Shubha. Shubha, you want to talk a little bit about your experience here?
So yes, thanks, Saurav. Hey, everyone. I'm Shubha Gururaj Rao. I'm part of the solutions engineering team here in the Sunnyvale Swamp in JFrog. I've been with JFrog for the last 2 years, and it's been the most amazing ride I've had till now. Lots to learn, a lot of exciting things that we always look for, and then a lot of really good customer interactions. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Shubha. So let's go ahead and then jump right into this, right? And in discussing multi-site replication, I think the first thing that we want to try and understand, and this is usually, I hear a lot of confusion around this topic in particular, which is push versus pull replication, right? So could you describe to us what is push versus pull replication, and why do we care about the differences between them, and how does this affect our organizations?
So with push, as you see, push is actually always between two local repositories, whereas when it comes to pull, it's between a local repository and a remote repository, right? So just to understand what is push replication, it is used to synchronize, as I said, the local repositories, and it's always implemented by the Artifactory server on the near end. Right. So say, for example, if you have two separate instances or two separate setups, one in US and one in Europe, and if you want to push some artifacts or have some artifacts available which are in US, in Europe as well, so then what you do is you go ahead and create a local repository in your Europe setup and then set up this push replication between your local US setup, local US repository to the local Europe repository. Whereas in pull replication, what happens is it's more of you're pulling the artifacts from the source to the target. So then what you would do, as the slide here says, you actually have a local repository. Same example, in US, you have a local repository. And in the European setup, you will set up a remote repository, and you will ask for certain artifacts to be pulled. But in this push replication and pull replication, there are a couple of options as well, right? When it comes to push, you can say, I want that the push to happen at certain amount at a certain point in time. So this is what is called as a scheduled replication. Whereas an event-based push replication, what happens is whenever an artifact has been pushed into the source, that information gets pushed into your target. That's, in this case, the European setup right away. So that's event-based replication. So similarly, with pull as well, we support 3 different types: scheduled, event, as well as on-demand. So same thing here in pull replication as well. You can schedule for that pull to happen at a certain point of time, or you can have that pull replication happen when there is a new artifact that has been deployed into your source server. Then you also have a third option, which is more of an on-demand proxy pull, right? So it acts like a typical remote repository, wherein you create the remote repository, set it up, and just point it to an Artifactory repo that's on your source. And then whenever a new user or any request comes in, the remote repository is going to check if that artifact has already been cached. If it has not been cached, then it's going to reach out to the source, pull that artifact, cache it, and then resolve it for you. So with scheduled, event, and on-demand, as you see, the way it works for push and pull are a little bit different. So we always have to keep in mind, what is it that is required, and when do I want that artifact to be available when you choose push or pull. So
got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I do want to dig into some of the use cases where, push or versus pull, scheduled versus event might make more or less sense. But before we dive sort of more deeper into those use cases, I want to make sure that we hit all the definitions of everything. So the next point of confusion usually tends to be around the multiple types of topology that exists in our environments, right? So the next thing that I want to cover is, what are the different topologies and what does it mean, right? So the two types, star and mesh. Can you please explain the difference between these two topologies here?
Yes. So, Saurav, I agree that there is some confusion in the topology. I wouldn't say it's too much of a confusion, because here, when we talk about topology, it's more about how you're setting up your repositories to talk to each other, right? So here in this first example, we are taking the star topology, right? So the main thing in star topology is you have like a superset of all the data in one region, and you might have other regions which might not want to have all the data. So this you can consider as subset of all the data, a subset of a data that is required. So then what you do, you set up a main Artifactory instance in Amsterdam in this example. And then you have multiple instances, one in Bangkok, Cape Town, and Denver. And then this is more just a topology, right? But then the replication process itself can either be push or pull. Okay, so the topology setup and the push or pull replication are not tightly integrated or tightly connected with each other. It's more of what works for you, as we said. So, it's all based on your use case. Whereas in a mesh topology, what happens? Even in mesh topology, the replication and the topology setup are two different things. You will use the combination of which either push or pull works in your mesh setup. But the main ideology in the mesh topology is anything that's being pushed into one setup, in this case, the Amsterdam one, gets replicated over to the Bangkok one, and anything that's in the Bangkok setup will get replicated to the Amsterdam one. So if you look at it, Amsterdam or this Bangkok and this mesh setup is very is a very good use case, or is a solution for your DR use case, right? So that if something happens to your Amsterdam setup, you can pivot all your users to use the Bangkok one. And once Amsterdam gets back up and running, whatever you would have pushed into Bangkok is anyway getting replicated back to Amsterdam. And you can now start using Amsterdam setup as well. So DR would be one of the main things for mesh. But the other use case is also wherein you can, you have users all around the world. You want them to have localized access to artifacts, but at the same time, you want to use these instances as DR as well. That is when mesh would be the best option for you.
Okay. I think so. One of the main points that I'm understanding here, would it be correct to say that with mesh, I have multiple points of write into Artifactory, whereas with star, I have that single point. So there's one site, which is the development site. I'm doing all my development, writing into Artifactory from there, but I want the data synchronized across all other instances for reading purposes. Whereas with full mesh, because I'm doing development and I'm writing out artifacts in multiple Artifactory locations, I have multiple different development sites, which might have some overlap but are possibly independent of each other. Those are the situations where full mesh would make more sense, which is decoupled from the type of replication that I might set up. Because I could do a star topology with pull replication rather than push, and then the same thing applies again to mesh. Is that exactly. So with pull and push, what happens is, see, with push, it's more like now the source is responsible for pushing the data over to the target, right? But at the end of the day, say, for example, something happened in the network and that push was not successful, or it's a little bit slow, then if you're looking to consume that artifact on the target side, you'll basically get a 404, right? You'll not be able to consume that artifact. But whereas in pull replication, what happens is the metadata gets replicated right away. And then
the target is the one that says, hey, I see that there is a new event on the source. Event in the sense there is a new artifact that has been deployed on the source. So can you go ahead and send it over to me? So the metadata gets copied over, and then it starts pulling the data as well. So in this example, what happens, because the metadata is already there, so in your CI pipeline, or if you're trying to consume that artifact in some format, you will not get a 404 right away. You will get a 200 OK. And once the data is available, it will make it available for you as well. Make sense?
That makes sense, which is great for your CI system, because that means that rather than timing out, rather than failing the build and breaking, it will possibly just take a little bit longer while it's streaming that artifact rather than serving from the cache.
Exactly.
That's very good.
Okay. Right. And one other thing was with event and schedule, many of the customers, so let me take a step back. Not many. It always depends on the use cases, again, as I said. Some customers say that my network is very, very busy during the daytime. So I'll do the replication in the evenings when the network usage is low, because the DR setup or the other setup that I have does not need to consume the artifacts right away. They can wait till the end of the day, or they can wait till the next day to consume the artifacts. So in this case, I'll just go with the scheduled replication, right? But when it comes to event-based, if you want the data to be available right away in the other setup as well, then yes, event-based, either push or pull, will be the best option for you.
Okay, excellent. Now, this is a great segue into a question that Stan has, which is, does push or pull replication perform any retry, right? So we were talking about network issues and things like that. So if there is some kind of a network failure, for any reason this replication doesn't occur, how do we handle that?
So actually, it is a setting that you can put in the newer version 7. This is a setting that goes in your systems.yaml file as well. With any type of replication that you set up, say, for example, you set up event-based replication, right? And it tries to push the data. It fails. Network is busy. Something happens. It fails. So after a certain amount of time, it retries again. Okay. And even if that time it fails, it will try again. So the default value for this is every 10 seconds it will try, and it tries for 3 times. Okay. And say, for example, this is where even if you set up an event-based replication, the scheduled replication is a requirement. The reason for that is your scheduled replication will act as your safety net. So at that point of time, say, for example, as I said, if it's in the evening and something happened in the daytime, it was not able to replicate that data. So in the evening time, whatever was not replicated from the source to the target, it will get replicated at that time. So that said, as I said, so there are 3, the retry happens thrice, and then it's every 10 seconds. But that is something that you can customize, and you can make changes in your systems.yaml file.
Excellent. So can you also increase the number of retries, and or is it just the duration? Both?
Yes, okay. You can. But the thing is, always be careful about the number of retries, because if you're trying it out multiple times, then you're also consuming the resources on the source side, right? So you should always be, you should also be aware of that. And replication is also 1 thread per repository. So that's also another thing that you have to keep in mind.
Right. So you don't want the replication to keep those threads busy, and then now the traffic that's coming into that particular node is going to have issues.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you. So, with that, let's go ahead and hopefully, Stan, we've managed to answer that question. And guys, please feel free to speak up if you have any additional questions. The next thing that I want to discuss here is, what are the different advantages, right? Where we would choose, what are the use cases for multi-site replication, and what are the different things that make sense where we will choose one topology over the other, right?
Yes.
So if you could just walk us through some of these advantages and some of the gains that we get.
So one of the major advantages of mesh replication, as I said, is you get an active DR, right? Because most of the customers say that, I'm taking backups, and if there is something that goes wrong, I'm going to bring my backups and have it up and running. So this is where your RPO and RTO would matter quite a lot, right? Some customers say that, no, I want minimum downtime, and having a mesh replication would help you replicate the data from one setup to another setup. But at the same time, again, when we talk about replication, we are only talking about the artifacts itself, right? We have not yet talked about the access information. So for that, there is another tool. We don't need to get into that. If you're interested, we can definitely send some follow-ups for that. But when it comes to DR, these are the two things that you have to keep in mind: artifacts and access federation. So for the artifacts, as I said, the mesh replication, more importantly, the event-based replication would be the best option for you. With star topology, as I said, if you want a subset of the data in each of these regions, but at the same time, you want these regions to be read as well as write, because I do have about 50 developers who will be writing into my Bangkok setup. So you do want to have a full-fledged Artifactory instance there. But then they don't need to consume all the data that's in your Amsterdam setup. So you'd only replicate the ones that are required for them. So in this case, you can set up a star topology and probably just set up a on-demand proxy pull, because it's not all artifacts that are required for these folks to consume, right? So these are some of the different use cases. But
so
again,
could I set up a mixed topology where I do a star from one site to another site, where but in a different location I have full mesh set up between two other sites?
Yes.
Right, so I can mix and match that way. I can mix and match pull replication versus push replication, and then I can also mix and match. Oh, right, event based versus scheduled versus on demand for pull replication.
Exactly, right.
So
we can
huge matrix. We can map out, like there's a bunch of different permutations that are available for different ways that you could implement these replication strategies, depending on whatever works for you. Even things like you mentioned here, network latency and stability. So that would be a good case for, I believe, pull replication, right?
Exactly. And the hybrid model that you were talking about, wherein you can use mesh as well as star, is a very good use case, right? Some of our bigger customers, they want to set up the star topology, but at the same time, they also want to have a good DR strategy. So for some of these satellite regions, they set up these smaller instances and have that main instance, and this is that star topology. But for the DR setup, they'll have another data center or maybe another region on the cloud, between which they'll have that mesh replication. So that's a very valid use case, and we do have a lot of our customers who are doing that today.
Okay, definitely. It's really easy to kind of start thinking about as everything is full mesh or everything is at star, but it's good to know that we can do a mix and match based on the specific use case of your site, right? So it doesn't have to, you don't have to take an organizational approach to this. You can take a very customized mix and match sort of approach based on the specific needs of your team, based on specific needs of that data center that you're working with.
Exactly. So that's the reason most of the time as a solutions engineer, right, this is what we discuss with customers to tell them, this is what would fit for you. If this is the use case, then we'll work with them on how that setup can look like, and then we can walk them through the process. So yeah, there are multiple use cases for these.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you so much, Shubha, and thank you everyone for joining the session. I know we went a little bit over here, but it's just such an interesting and critical topic that we wanted to make sure we're able to cover everything here. If you have any questions, please feel free to connect and send them offline to your account manager or whoever your point of contact is there. And thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Saurabh and Shubha. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So as you know, we're continuing this series throughout this week. So tomorrow we will be talking about JFrog CLI and user plugins. So another interesting topic. We hope you will be able to join us tomorrow again. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you will receive the recording of this webinar. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you, everyone, and we wish you a great day. Goodbye.